Hi, welcome to the session. I'm Salia Haider. I'm a Senior Partner Solutions Architect specializing in Microsoft technologies. Myself and Thor Giddings will be presenting this session today. So here's the agenda. Why modernize with AWS? We'll start with that, then go into .NET modernization journey. Then we'll spend some time on modernization tools and services. With that, let's get started. So, why modernize with AWS? We want to meet you where you are, and we'd like to help you with your modernization journey. This is the reason why AWS has invested in .NET tooling and compatibility with our underlying services to make it easy for you to modernize your .NET applications. Let's dig in to see what this means for you. This is a graph that shows our pace of innovation, specifically with respect to the support of Windows on AWS. The journey started in 2006, and we continue to innovate at a fast pace to help you migrate and modernize Windows applications on AWS with speed and at scale. If you look at the latest innovations in the upper right-hand corner, the majority of them are around supporting .NET developers. It is important to get on the same page as to what modernization means. Modernization is essentially progressively transforming existing enterprise applications by helping them take advantage of modern infrastructure architecture such as serverless, containers, and organizational patterns such as DevOps practices. And all this to essentially maximize the resiliency, engineering efficiency, and business agility. It's the combination of efforts across all three areas that drive maximum benefits of digital transformation. So, back to why. How many of these things resonate with you? If you look at your organization's key goals for this year, how many are on this slide? The good thing is that modernization can help you address these business needs, whether that is increasing your innovation velocity, reducing your cost of maintaining legacy applications, or providing a better customer experience during peak load. Peak demand. The recent Gartner Cloud Buyer Survey showed 84% of customers either agree or strongly agree that application modernization would be a high priority in the next 2 years. And 81% said that moving and building apps to be cloud native would be a high priority. So when we talk to customers about moving to AWS, the first topic is almost always cost. And it's an incredibly important dimension to work on. But the number one reasons customers move to AWS is increased innovation. If we look at this chart, let's deal with that downward trending line first. From going on premises on the left to fully cloud native and optimized on the right, you see your cost of compute going down. Now, if you look carefully, what you will see is that there are a number of steps along the way. And this is important for you to realize that it's a journey, and the speed of that journey really depends on a lot of factors of your business. And AWS is there to support you in accelerating your modernization journey. As the size of compute gets smaller, the unit of scaling gets finer, and you start becoming more efficient with your resources, increasing your ability to scale and reducing your cost. If you look at the upward trending line, you are looking at the innovation velocity. And the way I like to look at this is the amount of time you can spend building new technology versus maintaining existing technology. As you move to the right, you adopt more automation, finer grained services, and less operational overhead, allowing you to be more agile and to increase the innovation in your application for your customers. So, We want to meet you where you are. Whether you are moving to .NET 6 or adding new functionality to your .NET Framework applications, we have you covered. When it comes to tooling, we support all of the popular IDEs and tools that .NET developers use. We know that you live and breathe in these tools, and we want to support you by providing extensions to IDEs so that you stay within your familiar development environment. So we have toolkits for Visual Studio Code, and a CDK or Cloud Development Kit for .NET, a plugin tool for Azure DevOps for deploying directly to AWS, tools for PowerShell, .NET CLI extensions, and we have full support for .NET 5 with our Graviton 2 ARM-based processors. Now, I'll pass it on to Thor.
Thanks, Saleha. Hello, everyone. I'm Thor Giddings, and I'm the leader of the .NET Developer Advocacy Group here at AWS. So when we talk to customers about .NET modernization, we split it into 3 fundamental steps. The first is assess. Determine your current application landscape, how you build your applications, what your business goals are, and where your different applications fit into those goals. The next step is mobilize. The vast majority of the time that I spend with customers is teaching them about technology. It is incredibly important to not only understand the skill sets that your employees have, but where the gaps are and how to fill those gaps so that when you're resourcing your modernization project, you can be as efficient as possible. Finally, you have the modernize phase, where you're digging into the code and the architecture and modernizing your applications. So let's talk about some of the ways you can go about that. Typically, customers start with a lift and shift into AWS. We support running your Microsoft workloads and Windows-based applications without needing to make application changes. But that first step, although it's really important, that really isn't modernization. A typical next step is replatforming to containers. This can give you great business benefits like quicker scaling and better resilience and better compute optimization without needing to change your code. It also gives your application portability and isolation. Now, at these first 2 pathways, you can still adopt new technologies and integrate to AWS Cloud Native Services. But when we see customers going all in on modernization, it's the 3rd pathway on this screen. And that is moving to .NET Core or .NET 5 or 6, breaking up their monoliths into microservices, and typically running on AWS Lambda or a combination of AWS Lambda and containers. So how can AWS help you with this journey? Because you're a .NET developer, why should you care about EC2 instances or how to get a Kubernetes cluster up and running in production? Well, I agree with you. You shouldn't have to worry about any of that. And this is where AWS invests on your behalf. Instead of worrying about how to deploy to EC2, you could use a service like AWS Elastic Beanstalk to deploy your application on top of EC2, letting Elastic Beanstalk take care of the undifferentiated heavy lifting. With containers, we have both our Amazon Elastic Container Services, or ECS, and our Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service, or EKS, that takes away the burden of creating and running a container orchestration system off of your shoulders so that you can just worry about the code and the architecture. Finally, we have AWS Lambda that lets you build event-driven architecture for microservices without having to deal with servers. No more worrying about scaling, resiliency, patching. All of that is abstracted away for you, and you can focus on the code. So if we dig a little deeper into which course is right for you, we have 3 primary motions. The first is rehosting, taking your existing application and running it on AWS. Next, you have replatforming, taking your existing application and maybe running it in containers. And then finally, you have refactoring, updating your existing application, moving to microservices, and using serverless or container technologies. It's important to note, though, that the vast majority of the customers that I work with, they employ all 3 of these patterns, and they base the path chosen on the individual application that they're working on. So let's double-click on each of these. When it comes to rehosting, you can do a simple lift and shift onto Windows on Amazon EC2. We've been running customers' Windows applications for almost 13 years in the AWS cloud. In fact, if you think about it, back when those legacy applications were cutting edge was probably about the same time we started hosting Windows on EC2. But if you want to make it a little easier on yourself, you can use AWS Elastic Beanstalk. You can simply upload your code, and Elastic Beanstalk automatically handles the deployment from capacity provisioning, load balancing, auto-scaling, all the way to application health monitoring. At the same time, you retain full control over your AWS resources powering your application and can access the underlying resources at any time. So now with the middle section of replatforming, if you have a containers first strategy or need the isolation and portability along with some of the computing and scaling efficiency of containers, well, I've got good news for you. Our container orchestration services, Amazon ECS and Amazon EKS, can run both Windows and Linux containers. You no longer have to take on the burden of getting it up and running. All you do is simply define your workloads via pods, tasks, or services, and let AWS handle the undifferentiated heavy lifting. The final block on the right-hand side of the screen is refactoring. And that is where most customers want to get to and where they show the most interest. Now, if you're running an event-driven architecture and the processing takes less than 15 minutes, and you don't want to worry about servers, AWS Lambda can be an ideal compute environment. Lambda has support for both .NET Core and .NET 5 and 6, but it's a Linux-based computing environment. If you want to take advantage of containers with your microservices, again, you can use ECS or EKS. But if you no longer want to deal with hosts and scaling, you can use AWS Fargate to run your containers in a serverless environment where you no longer have to worry about those hosts. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Saleha to talk about our tools and services.
Thanks, Thor. So Thor talked about the modernization journey and various options you have to run your applications on AWS in a secure, reliable, and performant way. However, we understand that it is a journey for modernizing legacy applications to run on cloud-native services. So let's talk about what tools and services AWS provides in order to accelerate your modernization journey. Today, we'll be looking at two of them specifically. We will start with Migration Hub strategy recommendations. Let's look into what is Migration Hub strategy recommendations. As you can see in this slide, there are a multitude of migration and modernization options available on AWS. Oftentimes, this might be overwhelming for our customers. And to navigate through these various paths, I would need a certain level of expertise as well as time. What if there was a service that I could tell it, this is what my environment looks like, my workloads, my servers, and here's my business goal. Then the service scans through my environment and comes up with recommended strategy options as well as tools that are in alignment with my business goals. Today, manually analyzing applications can take weeks or months as the complexity of each application varies based on its architecture and interdependencies, which can slow down the entire transformation process. It's difficult to gather all the data needed to make informed migration and modernization decisions in a timely fashion that is in line with your business objectives. Many more of the assessment challenges are listed here. For example, there's a lack of awareness of modernization pathways as well as the related tools and services. This is where Migration Hub Strategy Recommendation Service comes to the rescue. Migration Hub Strategy Recommendation assists in planning your migration and modernization initiatives by offering assessment and providing recommendation based on viable transformation paths for your applications. It identifies application targets that can be transformed using AWS modernization tools. So there are three phases in our approach to complete large-scale migrations. And then you start operating and optimizing in the cloud. An assessment phase where we build a business case and perform a cloud readiness assessment. A mobilization phase where we build an AWS architecture, migration plan, and mobilize businesses to migrate at scale. And a migration and modernization phase where we move workloads to AWS. And a cloud operating model is put in place once in AWS to run and optimize for further business benefit. AWS Migration Hub helps across all of these three phases. AWS Migration Hub strategy recommendation automates the process of analyzing running applications and offers migration and modernization recommendations that are tailored for each application. It analyzes application binaries, runtime environment, application source code, and uses a built-in rules engine to identify technically viable and feasible migration and modernization options. Strategy recommendation also factors in your business goals to stack rank and recommend the top option that best meets your business and technical needs and constraints. As you can see, strategy recommendations supports multiple modernization outcomes in line with your preference and business objectives. So based on whether you'd like your workloads to work on VMs, managed services, or cloud native services, the service will provide you recommendations accordingly. Options recommended may include a simple rehosting on EC2 or a more optimized option of replatforming to containers or refactoring to open source technologies such as .NET Core, .NET 5, and PostgreSQL. So how does it work? Here are the three steps. Data collection, where server inventory and application metadata is collected, along with your business objectives and constraints as input. Analysis phase. This is where all the data collected is analyzed, including the source code and database optionally. Then comes the recommendation phase. Here is where finally the strategy recommendation along with the tools is provided as output. So optionally, the application and database incompatibilities that would need to be addressed are also provided. With that, let's see how this works in action. I'm going to be walking you through how strategy recommendation works. It is visible only through the Migration Hub. So from the AWS console, I navigate to the Migration Hub dashboard and I select the strategy menu. This launches this dashboard. There are three steps from end to end in this process. First, configuring the data collectors. Second, setting up the preferences. And third, and the final step is going to be to go through the recommendations, where migration and modernization strategy is being recommended for each of the workloads as well as the servers. What is the relevant tool and what are the other viable options? If this is the first time I'm coming here, I will see the Get Recommendations button here. If I come back to this page again, instead of a Get Recommendations, I will see View Recommendations, which will take me to the recommendations page. So imagine I'm a customer navigating here for the very first time. I'm going to click on Get Recommendations. This is going to launch a wizard. Before it launches a wizard, it would ask me if I agree to service linked role, SLR in other words. All this means is that it is asking permission to create a service linked role in your account. It includes all of the permissions needed to access the other AWS services on your behalf. So I'm going to agree to this. All right. So this launches the wizard, starting with the configuration for data collection. So for data collection, Application Discovery Service, ADS, is a prerequisite. Once you have your servers discovered in ADS, strategy recommendations, Application Data Collector client must be able to collect data remotely from servers. So there are two ways you can provide data to strategy recommendations. Either use the registered application data collectors method, or you can use the import template method. As part of this, I have an option to also ask for source code analysis for modernization, which we'll see here in just a little bit. So I'm actually going to go through registering the data collectors process. This list is currently empty. Once I configure and set up a data collector, you will see this list being populated with all of the registered data collectors here. With that, let's go ahead and move to the machine where I download the data collector. All right, I'm logged into the Linux machine where I have already downloaded and installed the data collector. Now let's first create a bash shell session in the collector Docker container. Now let's go ahead and configure the data collector. Now it is asking if have you set up IAM permissions in your AWS account. I'm going to say yes, I have. Now it's prompting for some credentials. Let me go ahead and provide that. Now it's asking for AWS region name. The default is US West 2, and I'm going to accept that default. Now it is asking if I want to upload collector related metrics, as it will help get some insights to learn and make strategy recommendations better. Saying yes. Now the question is if I want to upload logs. Same thing. Saying yes. Yay, the application data collector is set up successfully now. A few more prompts to ask for some additional options. So this one is to look into source code analysis. I'm going to be providing a link to the GitHub repository. I'm going to say yes here, and I'm going to say git and my endpoint. And do I have any other C# repositories? I'm going to say no, and now we are all set. So we are all done with the collector setup. Let's go back to our registered list of data collectors in the wizard and take a look. All right, so we are at the configure data sources page. We can see the same data collector we just registered. It shows up here in this list. Once the data sources are configured and the collector registration is successful, you are all set to move on to the next step, which is to configure your preferences. Now let's move on to that step now. So here I'm telling the service what is my preference. These preferences are and prioritized business goals as well are taken into consideration when we are actually generating a recommendation. For instance, let's say my first preference here um, is license cost reduction. I'm going to put it up here. So then most of my recommendations will be based on what should be the best strategy for me to reduce the licensing cost. I can also choose application preferences between like AWS managed or self-managed right here. Similarly, for the database preferences, what kind of database I preferred, homogeneous or heterogeneous databases. So with that all set, we move on to the next step. And here I come to the review and submit screen. So here are my data sources, here are my preferences, and then I'm all set to go ahead and start the data analysis process. All right, so now let's go ahead with that. There it goes. The data analysis process has started. Um, we can come back to this page where it shows data analysis is in progress. It continues to show percentage completed as it progresses along. Now it is going to take just a few minutes. So once the strategy recommendations completes the analysis of all the workloads and servers, as you have specified in your account, taking into account your business goals and preferences you have provided, it comes up with a set of recommendations on not only the migration and modernization strategy, but also the tools that will help you get there. That's the beauty of this service. So let's once this completes, let's go ahead and take a look at those recommendations. All right, now the analysis is complete. Now let's walk through what we have here on the recommendations page. And here on the summary tab of the recommendations page, it shows the information grouped for each strategy here, like servers for rehost, application components for replatform, as well as for refactor. And then here you see the anti-patterns listed. Anti-patterns are a list of known issues found in your portfolio that are categorized by severity. A high severity anti-patterns represent incompatibilities that need to be resolved. Medium severity anti-patterns represent warnings, and low severity anti-patterns represent just informational issues. So here's a link to the list, which is a breakdown of anti-patterns based on severity. Let's take a look into this anti-pattern list. So here, let me look for the name anti-pattern name here. This one says the anti-pattern name is WinRegistry, and the advice here is that we are relying on the Windows registry. You should refactor your application to stop the dependency on Windows registry as it will not work on when we port it to Linux. So there are more, for example, incompatible NuGet packages, etc. So we just went through the summary tab of recommendations page. Now let's move to the next tab, which is application components. These application components, each of them is a logical categorization of related components. Let's take a little bit deeper look into one of these. So I'm going to choose Nob Commerce, which is an IIS-based application. Let's look at view details. And then the recommended strategy here is to refactor it, as you can see. This shows a high-level information that it is an IIS-based application. The source code analysis is complete, etc. Please note that the tool for refactoring here is Porting Assistant for .NET. Since Porting Assistant can be used to assist in converting .NET Framework applications to .NET Core and move to Linux, this conforms with my goal of license cost reduction, and hence this is my top recommendation. So let's look at this other tab which says strategy options. I see here that for Nob Commerce, there is a recommended option as well as other viable pathways are also mentioned along with the tools. How nice is that? So then you have an option here to change the preference here, right? So if you choose any other option for this, for example, you can set that as your preferred option, and that way when you export this particular report, you will get that override inside as well. It also works as a feedback loop to fine tune our recommendations priority. So going back here to strategy recommendations, Let's move on to the servers tab. So there are, as you can see, a Windows server as well as other servers. None of them are end of support, and the strategy being recommended is for rehost. There's a Linux server and a Windows server. And the very last tab here is the Preferences tab. So these are the choices I made when going through the wizard just before starting the analysis. The options that I have here is to edit my preferences and then reanalyze the data right here. These edited preferences will not take effect until you reanalyze the data. The recommendations are based on the updated preference. Also, I have an option to export the recommendations, or in other words, download the report. With that, I would like to ask each one of you to go ahead and try out strategy recommendations today. Thank you. Over to you, Thor.
Thanks, Saleha. One of the key innovations that AWS released last year is the Porting Assistant for .NET. This is a program that can run standalone or within the Visual Studio IDE. So why are customers moving from .NET Framework to .NET Core? Well, one of the big reasons is moving over to a Linux-based computing environment and saving on operating systems licensing cost. If you're targeting microservices, if you need high performance and scalable systems or want to run cross-platform, then .NET Core is the recommended pathway. Also, our customers have seen a performance improvement of 20 to 30% when moving to .NET Core on Linux. So there's an obvious cost and performance benefit. So what are the challenges of actually moving from .NET Framework to .NET Core? The first problem comes from NuGet packages not supporting .NET Core. There are many NuGet packages that are exclusively available on .NET Framework only, and that makes any .NET Framework application using those packages incompatible with .NET Core or .NET 5 or 6. That leads to another problem, which is the difficulty in assessing your code and your application for portability into a new version of .NET. And how much effort is that actually going to take to make it compatible? And without a proper assessment, it's difficult to plan the porting or gauge the timeline required to complete the porting. And when you start porting, there's a significant amount of manual work that needs to be carried out. You have to create new projects that are targeting the new runtimes. You have to reestablish all of your cross-project dependencies and reacquire your NuGet packages. And then you've got to copy all your code into those projects, and it's kind of a hassle, right? So what if there was an easier way? This is where the Porting Assistant for .NET comes in. It's an open source tool that scans your .NET Framework applications. It generates a .NET Core compatibility assessment and assists with the actual porting of your application. This helps reduce the manual effort involved in porting to .NET Core. It makes it easy for you to prioritize applications for porting based on the level of effort required using compatibility that the assessment report produces. And that accelerates application modernization by assisting with the actual porting of your application through package and reference file updates. So first of all, it's going to scan your code base. Then it's going to analyze your existing solutions and projects to find out which packages and APIs are compatible and which are not. It will find out what the cross-project interdependencies are, and then it will generate an assessment report that informs you of the incompatibilities and suggests replacements for you. The scanning and assessment makes it easy for you to prioritize your applications for porting based on the level of effort required and the replacement suggestions provided. Then it's going to help you port the application to .NET Core or .NET 5 by updating the package and project references and files and APIs where it found known replacements in the assessment, making it easy for you to kickstart porting as well. So enough with the talk, right? Let's see Porting Assistant in action with a real-world application. So in this demo, I'm going to show you the Porting Assistant for .NET. This is a standalone version of the product, but there is also a Visual Studio extension that you can use inside the IDE. I'm going to go ahead and click Get Started. I've already analyzed the NOP Commerce project, but if you wanted to analyze or assess a new solution, you just click Assess New Solution, you choose the solution file, and it's going to go through that assessment. So the version of NOP Commerce that I am looking at is targeting .NET 4.5.1 framework. And you can see it gives you a high-level assessment overview of the project. So the number of incompatible NuGet packages, the incompatible APIs, how many build errors, how many porting actions that it can actually do. So 640 in this case. And then you have tabs here at the bottom. So with the projects, you can actually look at an individual project like NOP Core. You'll see that it's targeting .NET 4.5.1. It is not referencing any other projects in the solution. 7 out of its 8 packages are incompatible with the version of .NET. I'm trying to target .NET 5 on this one. It has 26 out of 316 incompatible APIs, doesn't have any build errors right now, and we can do 8 porting actions. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual project references. And this is the dependency graph. So you can see like NOP Core is a project that is referenced by a lot of different other projects. So it might be a good one to start with because if you get that over to .NET 5 compatibility, it'll knock out a big area of the modernization that you need to do. So some people like to go outside in, some people like to go inside out. I prefer to start with the most referenced projects and work my way out. But it's nice because it shows you all the dependencies and you can kind of see how everything stacks up. It also does an analysis of your NuGet packages, and it not only shows you, like what package it is, what version you're running, how many projects reference it, how many source files references, how many APIs you call, but it also shows if it's the version that you're using, if it's compatible with your target version. So in this case, .NET 5, and if not, if it has a suggested replacement, it can tell you that version too. So like for AutoFac, it's showing that 4.0.0 is compatible. Finally, you have APIs. So if you want to see exactly which APIs are being called by which package, you can see the number of source files, the number of calls, and whether they're compatible or not compatible with the targeted platform. Also, you can go and actually do the porting where it's going to, if I select a project and I hit port project, and what this is going to do is it's going to copy over the files, it's going to make the porting changes that it knows about, it's going to update the framework. Now, when all this is done, I wouldn't be able to necessarily open up that project and just run it. There are a lot of incompatible NuGet packages that I'm going to have to deal with manually, but for the ones that it automatically found replacements for, I can go ahead and I can upgrade to a newer version. So I can see I need at least version 4 of AutoFac, but I could go even higher if I wanted to. I could go up to maybe the latest. Same thing with other packages, and when I hit port, it'll go ahead and it will start porting this, and then in the end I'll get a new project that has the new references and packages for me. So you can use Porting Assistant to determine the level of incompatibility and maybe the overall effort and where to start for your different projects in .NET. With that, let's get back to the presentation. So to wrap this up, we showed you a couple of tools that can help you modernize your .NET applications. Migration Hub strategy recommendations will give you prescriptive guidance on where you should land your application. The Porting Assistant for .NET helps you port your .NET Framework applications to .NET Core. Thank you for watching this session. I hope you learned a little bit about modernizing .NET applications, and I encourage you to try out our modernization tools like AWS, Migration Hub Strategy Recommendations, and the Porting Assistant for .NET. And as always, please keep the feedback coming. When you see issues or features that you want in our tools and services, let us know. This is how we build our roadmaps and new features. Have a great day.